The frogs earned the right to speak. Once upon a time, in an ancient and deep forest, there lived a big frog in a small pond. She was a peaceful creature who spent most of her time eating, swimming, and sleeping, and from morning to evening she did everything the smaller frogs did, except she did it bigger. She ate more, she jumped farther, and she was smarter, and she made much more noise. Everybody in the forest could hear her loud croaking, and everybody was happy that they could. You see, it was easy to get lost in the forest, but thanks to the frog's loud noise, you could just as easily find your way back to her pond. Maybe it would not have been the same if the big frog had kept singing during the night, but she was much too lazy an animal to stay active after dark. One day, an unknown visitor came to the forest for the first time. It was a young woman dressed in a beautiful gown. She was walking fast through the forest as if she was running away, and she never looked back. Many eyes by the princess passed by, but no one dared to help her, for the mad hunter was on her trail. "This is not our business," they said, "and we had better look away." For the mad hunter was an unyielding man who loved nothing but hunting down prey. For money and glory, nothing could escape his piercing eye for long. So the princess walked alone without help until she was hopelessly lost in the big forest. Exhausted, she pressed on, with no idea where she was heading, as the hunter drew ever closer. Dogged in his pursuit, she continued this way until she heard a heavy cloaking far off to her left, so clear and loud that the princess immediately made for the source of the noise. A few minutes later, she reached the big frog in the small pond, and the frog looked at her with a gentle smile. "Help me, please," said the princess. "I need a place to rest and hide." "Ribbit," answered the frog, and the princess frowned. "Please stop making noise. The mad hunter is after me." "Ribbit," said the frog again, so loud that the princess had to cover her ears. The creature began to jump every which way. "What are you doing?" asked the princess. "Stop all the noise or he will find us." But the frog kept croaking and jumping around her, left, right, and right, up and down, ribbit, ribbit, until the princess understood the meaning of all the fuss. Cautiously the woman climbed on the back of the big animal, and then with a leap the frog set away from the pond. The frog jumped so high and so far that even the hunter could not find where the princess had gone. With a few jumps, the princess was out of his piercing eye. A few jumps more, and she had vanished for good. The princess closed her eyes and left her clever mount carry her wherever the creature pleased. Less than an hour later, the big frog had reached the other side of the ancient forest, near the shores of a very deep lake. There, the land without noise, in front of the big wooden house that had been abandoned. "Thank you," said the princess, covering the animal's snout with kisses. "I only wish you could speak, so I would have understood what you were trying to do sooner." As she pronounced those words, something incredible happened. The big frog suddenly was able to speak. Her first words startled the princess. "The mad hunter is always at my heels. Now you're safe, and I have my revenge. You can stay in this house. It has been abandoned for a long time, and no one will look for you here." And then, without looking back, the big frog jumped back to the pond. And this is how the big frog saved the princess, and how she earned the right to speak. I guess we gotta read all this, but I need a drink before I continue on with this. This might be cut out and put it in its own little, its own little part, but then again, maybe not. I don't know. Let's see. The Bear and the Princess. Once upon a time, in the ancient and deep forest, the old bear stood on the bank of the river, swiping at salmon on their way to the spawning grounds. Just as he got his paw on a particularly fat one, he heard a woman shouting for help. He considered her simply eating his salmon, but then she screamed again, and he lumbered over to investigate. After a short walk, he found the princess clinging to the top of the tree, while a wolf snarled and snapped at the base of the tree. Old Bear would normally not get in the middle of such a situation. After all, as a fellow predator, he understood the wolf's need to hunt. But then he saw the princess, and he was struck by her beauty, and he knew he had to help. With a great roar, the bear heaved onto his hind legs, rising to his full height. The wolf snapped and snarled in his direction, but the bear roared again, and the wolf took off into the tree, his tail between his legs. The old bear fell back down to all fours and stared up at the princess. She regarded him fearfully. "You can come down," he said. "How do I know you didn't save me just so you can eat me yourself?" asked the princess. I suppose this is a fair question," admitted the old bear, "but I promise I won't eat you." The princess had no reason to trust the old bear, except that he had kind eyes, and so she slowly made her way down the tree. When she reached the ground, the bear only watched her, and so she supposed she was not going to be eaten today. "Thank you," she told the old bear. "Of course," he said. "Can I walk with you back to your home?" Of course, said the princess, and so the princess and the old bear walked together through the forest, back to the big wooden house. After that day, the princess would occasionally find gifts from the bear. A fresh caught salmon, a handful of ripe berries, a noodly blue bluebell. One spring, when the sun thaw flooded the path out of the princess' home, the old bear was there, and she rode his back across the river. The old bear began to think that the princess should be his mate. After all, she had no mate, and she needed one, and he could keep her warm and provide her much more suitable din, and catch fish for her and protect her from wolves. She in turn would brush out his fur and pick berries without smushing half of them, and scratch that one part of his back he couldn't reach, and with how she took care of the goblins, she would be an excellent mother for his cubs. One day the old bear came with a ring and a spouse, and asked the princess to be his bride. I'm sorry, said the princess. You are a very good friend, and I appreciate all you've done for me. But I cannot marry you. You are a bear, and I am a princess. It would never work. The old bear was crushed. Can we still be friends? He asked. We will always be friends, said the princess, but I will never marry you. The old bear and the princess carried on their friendship, and after 1 year he tried again to ask her to be his bride, but once again she refused him. This happened 1 year later, and 1 year after that, and then finally the princess said, Old bear, you are my dear friend, and I appreciate all you have done for me, but I would sooner you had left me to the wolves than marry you, and that is how it will always be. I have my hands full with 2 goblins who live under my house, and they are all I need. That wounded the old bear deeply, but it was finally enough to stop his proposals. They remained friends, and he continued to give her gifts of fresh salmon and ripe berries and newly bloomed bluebells. But the old bear never again asked the princess to be his bride, much as he might have wanted to. And that's how the princess befriended the old bear and how she refused him. Wow, that's a sad story. Oh, goodness. The beaver fixes the house. Once upon a time, in an ancient and deep forest, there lived a white princess in a big wooden house. One night, a particularly violent storm shook the house. It shook the shingles on the roof and the planks in the walls. It even shook the beams on which the house stood, blowing the whole thing near to the ground. The princess hid in the closet, fearing that the house would come down on her as she slept. In the morning, the house was still standing, but it was badly damaged. The storm had blown shingles off the roof and planks off the walls, and even bent a post upon which the house stood. The first 2 things she could fix, but the last concerned her. What will I do? Despaired the white princess, for though she knew many things, she did not know how to fix the big wooden house. Just then the old bear came by to see if the princess had any trouble in the storm. When he found her nailing planks back in place, he said, Stop, princess, let me do that for you. I'm happy to do it, said the princess, but if you want to help with the roof, you may. When the pair were done with the roof and the walls, they examined the bent support posts. I could throw my body against it, said the old bear. I am very large. He stretched up onto his hind legs, being sure the princess could appreciate how very large he was, and then charged straight at the post. He threw his body against it with an impressive thud. The impact moved the post but too far, and it ended up in the other direction. Figures. The wise princess decided the more precision was needed. She thought then of the very old beaver who kept an Excellent dam. Perhaps she could help. She went looking for the very old beaver and found the industrious animal hard at work, slapping down mud on the part of her dam that had been blown apart in the storm. Most of the structure was unharmed because the beaver was very good at building things. The princess knew she had come to the right place. Beaver, she said, my house was damaged in the storm. Would you help me fix it? I believe I could do that, yes, said the very old beaver, and she paused at fixing her own den to follow the princess. The very old beaver examined the big wooden house and nodded. Excuse me. It will be an easy fix, she said, and she set about riding the post with loud slaps of her tail. When she was done, the white princess stroked the beaver's head. Thank you, beaver, she said. The wind blew the shingles off the roof and the planks off the walls and even bent this post. Now, thanks to you, I still have a home. Think nothing of it, said the very old beaver, who returned to work on her own den once again. That winter, the very old beaver grew ill, very ill. She was not able to fix her den, nor gather food. When the princess found out, she set about delivering meals to the beaver. She brought stews of corn and beans and baskets full of bark and twigs from the beaver's favorite aspen. One day, the wise princess noticed that the beaver's den had begun to fall apart. She set about fixing it, and though she was not as talented as the very old beaver, the fix kept the creature warm and dry. "Thank you," said the very old beaver. "Of course," said the princess. "You helped me when the storm blew my house near to the ground. Thanks to you, I still have a home, and I am happy to do the same." The princess continued to nurse the old beaver until the day she came to the dam and the forest was still. No birds sang, no branches rustled, and no small things skittered within the underbrush. "Oh," said the princess, staring sadly at the dam, for she knew the old beaver had passed on. "Goodbye, my friend." And that is how the very old beaver saved the big wooden house, and how the wise princess repaid her kindness. Okay, so far all these stories are kind of sad. Like, really sad. And this is the one she pointed out. You have to figure out the riddle, but I just want to read all of them because I kind of feel maybe this book is slightly based on real events with the people, because they called the mother princess, and so she's considered. So she must be the princess in the story. So these things might be real events that happened, but edited into a way for children to, digest it. The Princess Party. Once upon a time in the deep and ancient forest, the princess was melancholy, which means kind of sad, kind of, meh, because it was 1 year anniversary when she had to run away from home. Sensing her sadness, her forest friends showed up to her door. They were headed by the pelican, impetuous and attentive, and organized by a moose, stalwart and far-sighted. The old bear was there, with his claws so sharp, as well as the big frog paddling away. Even the haunting muskrat, who mostly came out in the night, had come. The bear invited her to ride on his back, promising no wolf would harry her path, and then the animals led her to a fairy glen, where a fabulous party had been prepared. There was a buffet of seafood, and the pelican had served from her never-empty beak. The air was filled with twinkling fairy lights. The moose had arranged after clouds filled the sky, and the gregarious frog mixed up fizzling drinks. Only the muskrat had done nothing in particular, mooching off everyone else's hard work. Wow. The princess had a very good time at her party, such as a good time that she forgot to say thank you to any of her friends. Noticing this, the fairies devised a bit of mischief. When the princess went to open her gift, she found 3 identical boxes at the edge of the glen. Puzzled, she turned back and gasped, and Tarberry had vanished. "Because you had taken your friends for granted," called the naughty fairies. "We have hidden them from you, but we like games. Guess who has given you each of these presents, and you'll get your friends back." The princess opened the first box, and inside there was a torch, which, when lit, revealed the truth. Said the princess. "Someone wants to make sure I don't get lost in the woods when it's dark, and for that I always see right from wrong. Which one of my friends gave me a gift like that?" She opened the second box. Inside there was a magical sword, which would leap right out of the barrier hands to defend them. Said the princess. "Someone wants to make sure I am protected if I'm ever under a threat. Which of my friends would give a gift like that?" She opened the third box. Inside there was a bag of coins that always provide money if it was something the bearer truly need. Said Princess. "Someone wants to make sure I have money to buy food when I am hungry and clothes when I'm cold. Which of my friends would give me a gift like that?" The princess thought about her friends and then smiled certainly. "Fairies," she said, "I may have been thoughtless, but I appreciate all that my friends have given to me and all that they have done for me." She gave her answers, and the vexed fairies were forced to restore the party in a flash of colorful light. One by one she gave the animal a hug and thanked them for the presents, the party, and all they had done to help since she had moved into the forest. And that is how the princess celebrated her first anniversary in the woods. Okay, I get it, so you'll have to guess the gifts. But before that, we're gonna really read all this, which is a lot. They're all like 4 pages each. But I'm really curious about all of this. And I'm definitely going to put this as a separate part of the video, like a little snippet. so people who are interested can watch it, and others can just keep moving on with the game, I guess. Okay, Goblins in the Ice Cave. Once upon a time, in a deep and ancient forest, the crafty goblins were playing near the glacier when they discovered a hole in the ice. They crept through the gradually widening passage and found themselves inside a spacious ice cave. Light spilled down the undulating blue-white walls in a way that made them look like electric waterfalls, and a column made up of hundreds of icicles stood in the center, this was the time before the goblins had settled beneath the old wooden house, and they had nowhere to live. Perhaps we can live here, they said excitedly. Moments later, the sound of stomping feet interrupted their play, and they realized that perhaps someone already lived there. They hid behind a boulder to wait and see who was coming. The old bear scuttled into the cave, shaking powdery snow from his coat. He let out a giant yawn and lay down in the corner on the piles of tree brocks, snoring within seconds. When they were sure he was deep asleep, the goblins would conspire to claim the cave for themselves. They chipped away at the glacier until they had to fill a basket full of ice, then hid once behind the boulder and started tossing chunks of it on the sleepy bear. Now, the old bear was not the smartest creature in the forest, so when he woke up covered in ice, he roared, "My cave is collapsing." Then he lumbered to his feet and ran outside before the whole thing could come down on top of him. The goblins crept out after him and did a loop before coming back to find him sitting outside. "What happened?" they asked. "My cave is collapsing," bemoaned the old bear, "and it's time for me to hibernate. Where will I stay for winter?" It had not occurred to the goblins that the old bear had settled in for the winter, and they felt a little bad. But they did not want the old bear to know that they had done, so instead they offered to help him find a new den. Together they searched. They inspected camber stones and hollow trees and deeply pocketed knolls. Nothing they found was as beautiful as the ice cave, but the old bear settled on a packed earthen hollow that would keep him warm and dry for his long sleep. "Good night," he yawned, and the goblins gleefully returned to their new home. In the spring, the old bear woke and went for a nice long walk to stretch his legs. His path took him right up to his old cave when he heard a curious sound of laughter. Making his way inside, he was surprised to find that the cave was intact, and the goblins were inside playing a game. "What is this?" growled the old bear. The goblins stopped playing and looked ashamed. "We're sorry, old bear," said the goblins, "but we had nowhere to live, and it was just so beautiful. We didn't realize you were about to hibernate, and when we couldn't bear to tell you what we'd done." The old bear was angry at the trick, but the young goblins looked appropriately ashamed, and so he said, "Come with me." He led the crafty goblins to the hollow in which he had hibernated for the winter. "You two can have this spot," he said, "and look, someone had built a big wooden house right over the top of it." "No one lives there now," said Old Bear, "but one day maybe someone will." The earthen hollow was not as beautiful as the ice cave, but it kept the goblins warm and dry, and they were excited that someday they might have someone living overhead, someone who baked cakes and tolerate their mischief. And that is the story of how the crafty goblins tried to steal the cave of the old bear, and how they got their own instead. It's a lot of reading. The Princess and the Two Thieves. Once upon a time, in an ancient and deep forest, there was a wise princess in a big wooden house. The house was built from a strong wood of the forest, and it kept the princess warm and safe. The princess was not a native of the forest, but she never spoke about where she had come from, for it made her cry. She did not have many friends, but that's how she liked it. The forest was big and deep, and many paths led her house, but not many visitors passed by. The princess was happy to be left alone in the big house in the deep forest. She knew that the forest would provide for her, but that its generosity had to be respected. So she only took what she needed, and for a long time, life was just fine for the princess in the big wooden house. One winter day, when the snow blanketed the earth and ice bent the trees low, the wise princess realized that food was disappearing from her house. It was not much at first, only a few fruits and nuts and eggs vanishing during the night. "Maybe it's the birds," she said, "or the mice." And for the time, the princess was okay with losing some food, for the winter was long and little creatures needed to eat too. But then small items started to disappear as well: spoons and plates, forks and knives, and blankets. It was as if every time she was in one part of the house, something disappeared in another room. "That can't be bird or mice," said the princess. "I think I have a thief." So she went outside to look for trace in the snow and the noises in the wind, but there was nothing to be found nor to be heard. "That's strange," said the princess. "Maybe the thief is hiding inside my house." For many days she hunted, looking behind curtains and under the bed, in the attic, in the chimney, behind the poles, and under the carpets, but she found nothing, and as she searched, the food kept on disappearing night after night. "I will make a cake," frowned the princess, "a big cake, with every egg and fruit and nut I still have, so that I only have one thing to keep my eye on." She spent the whole day making the cake and using everything she had left. The cake she made was so big she could hardly carry it. "If I manage to protect the cake, I'll be able to survive the long winter," she said. So she added a lock to the oven and she kept the big cake safe inside. But the next morning the lock had been opened and the cake had disappeared. At first the princess cried because the cake was the last of her food until the snow melted. But then she noticed 2 trails of tiny feet in the spilled flour, and she followed the tracks to a hidden latch and the floorboards. This is how the princess realized that 2 tiny thieves were living under the wooden house right below her feet. Man, this is like murder in my throat. Oh crap. The princess makes new friends. Once upon a time, in an ancient and deep forest, there lived a wise princess in a big wooden house. She had been living alone just fine for a very long time until the day she noticed food and small items were disappearing from her house. The thefts went on until the day her last cake, which had been made with her last of her eggs and the last of her fruit, the last of her nuts and the last of her flour, well, the last cake was stolen too. And all she found at the scene of the crime were 2 trails of tiny feet and the spilt flour, leading to a hidden hatch in the floorboards. The princess did not try to open the hatch, nor did she try to break it. She was too tired and too hungry, and all she could do was cry in silence alone in the big wooden house, hidden in an ancient and deep forest. She cried for a long time until the evening arrived, and then she cried some more. Suddenly a tiny voice came from under the house. "What's that noise you make?" it asked. "We do not like it, not one bit. I'm crying because you 2 are mean to me, whoever you are. You stole all the food I had, and I will starve before the end of this long, cold winter." The hatch opened just a peep, revealing 2 frowning faces, peering out from the darkness of their hideout. "But we're hungry too," said the second creature. "We've been hiding in the cave for a long time, and now the winter is upon us, and we need food." The princess dried her eyes and smiled at the 2 goblins. "If we were friends, we could share the cake you stole from me." The 2 thieves spat and smirked. "A friend? What is that?" The princess frowned, for she realized that the 2 tiny thieves were lonely as she was. "A friend is someone you love and care for, someone you would never hurt." "We never hurt each other, and we care for each other," said the goblins at the same time. "Does that mean we are friends?" "Yes, that's exactly it, and if we were friends, you would not hurt us?" "Of course not. Friends trust each other." The goblins shook their little heads. "We trust no one, for no one trusts us." Their words made the princess cry again, for now she understood that the 2 creatures were not only as lonely as she was here in the big wooden house, but they'd been lonely since they were born. "You are making that noise again," frowned the goblins. "Please stop that, and if it makes us feel unhappy." "Are you a witch? Is this some sort of magic?" "It makes you unhappy because we are friends," said the princess. "But we don't know you, and you do not like us. Sometimes friendship comes right away, and even between people who are very different. Does this mean we can't steal from you anymore?" "Yes, but that's what we do. We are crafty goblins who live under your house." "Well, then maybe we could arrange something." "Is that what friends do?" "Yes, I believe they do." And this is how the princess met the crafty goblins and how they became friends. The Bear's Big Paws. Once upon a time in the deep and ancient forest, the old bear was out looking for a snack when he spied a bee's nest in a hole high up in the tree. The tree was dry and brittle, but the old bear was hungry, and so he made his way to the nest, but when he got there, he found a giant paw couldn't fit into the hole. Determined, he tried to force it inside, but the effort caused the branch below him to snap. The old bear tumbled to the ground and landed with a painful oof. He lay there stunned from the fall, and then all of a sudden something bit him. The bite was followed by another and another and another. Carpenter ants were swarming up his legs. You see, they had been nesting in the branch, and they did not appreciate being forced from their home. The old bear howled and jumped to his feet to dance around as he swallowed and snapped, but his big paws couldn't do much about the tiny ants. When he finally managed to squish or scare them off, the old bear heard someone laughing. The crafty goblins had seen the whole thing. "Clumsy old bear," they teased. "Those big old paws aren't good at anything, are they?" Then they sped off, leaving the old bear's pride hurting just as bad as his body. He lumbered through the forest, hungry and sad. "Maybe I am just a clumsy old bear," he moaned, "and my big old paws aren't good at anything." At that moment, the old bear heard a sad, sad noise. "What's that?" he wondered, and he followed the sound to where a mountain goat stood atop a boulder high up a hillside. "Oh, bear!" she cried. "Oh, bear, please help, my kid's stuck." Sure enough, the tiny mountain goat was trapped inside the stone, bleeding sadly. The old bear began to walk towards him, then stopped. "I'm probably just going to make it worse," he thought. But then the goat kid started to bleat any louder, and the old bear put away his fear. He climbed up where the goat was trapped, and careful of where he stepped, and tried not to think of how he only just fallen out of a tree. Every now and then the ground would slide away from under his feet, but he kept going. When he reached the goat kid, he put his mighty paws against one of the boulders and began to push. At first it didn't budge, but he dug in and pushed even harder. Finally the boulders parted just wide enough to let the kid scramble to safety. The old bear released the boulder and let out a roar of triumph. "Roar!" "Thank you," gushed the mama goat, and she and her kid bounded off up to the mountains. The old bear watched them go with a smile, and then made his way back down the hillside, wiggling his rump in triumph as he went. To his surprise, the crafty goblins waited at the bottom of the hill. "We saw the whole thing," they said. "We were wrong. You aren't just a clumsy old bear, and your paws are good for helping others." The old bear forgave the goblins for doubting him, because he had doubted himself just as much. He never again thought his paws were good at anything, even though sometimes they weren't always great at everything. And that's how the old bear proved that his heart was bigger than his paws. The moon hag loses her name. Once upon a time, in a deep and cold lake in the ancient forest, there lived an old seal who was a powerful witch in disguise. She was mean and cruel. She liked nothing more than swimming in the deepest part of the lake, where the light was dim under the ice, admiring the corpses of the many victims she tricked into the water over the years. She was so hateful, and only the cold water of the lake could keep her cool. Her most prized possession was a tin mirror sold to her by a secret keeper, and she kept it in a chest at the bottom of the lake. It was no ordinary mirror. If you looked in it, you would see the reflection of who you truly desired to be, and for 1 hour the mirror granted you the power to appear as that person. Whenever a boat or an unwise traveler approached the edge of the lake, the old witch used the mirror to appear as the beautiful woman she always wished to be. And with this disguise, she lured the unfortunate sailor or wanderer into the deep and cold water. There the old seal forced the victim to become her servant, and when she'd done with them, they joined her collection of corpses in the deepest part of the lake. One day, when the old seal swam down to her den under the lake, she discovered that someone had stolen her mirror. The chest where she kept her most prized possession had been forced open, and now it was empty. Who would have committed such a crime? Who had dared to deprive her of her only treasure? The old seal went mad, and her anger heated the water of the lake around her. For a time, everyone was happy with the temperature change, for the weather suddenly became sweeter and the air warmer. But after a few weeks, things started to get ugly. First, the fish began to die off, and that they could not live in the hot water. Then the glaciers began to melt, and the water of the lake rose and spilled out, flooding the forests and the meadows. And finally, the weather grew so hot that even the Ice King himself was awakened from his long sleep and decided to see what was going on. In the deepest part of the lake, he found the mad witch steaming among the corpses of her victims, so angry that the lake was about to boil. It only took a few minutes for the Ice King to understand what had happened and demand that the thieves present themselves before him. The thieves had no choice but to appear, for no one dared to disobey the Ice King. The crafty goblins presented themselves, mirror in hand. "Why did you steal the mirror?" asked the king. "We were curious. We just wanted to see what we really wanted to be," apologized the goblins. "But the stupid thing is broken. We look the same." "That does not mean it did not work," smiled the Ice King. "Now, apologize to give the mirror to me, for it is too powerful to be used by thieves or a mean old hag." The goblins apologized but gave the mirror to the Ice King, but the old seal was still angry. "And what about me?" she asked. "I have been deprived of my treasure, and I demand compensation." The Ice King frowned and he spoke again. "O hag, you are mean and cruel, but I concede you to have been wrong. For now you will be allowed to leave the lake and walk the earth as the hag you really are, but only when the moon is full, and you goblins had better stay away from the lake, for I will protect you from the moon hag's wrath. And this is how the two goblins forced the moon hag to change her name. The goblins tricked the Mad Hunter. Oh goodness, that's not good. The Mad Hunter seems scary AF. Once upon a time in the castle just beyond the ancient and deep forest, the Mad Hunter was punished by the Gold Lady for failing to return with the wise princess. For your failure, said the Gold Lady, I will take your left hand. You will return to the ancient and deep forest and hunt the wise princess, and if you can bring her back, I will return your hand to you. Fail again, I will take your right hand. The Mad Hunter could hunt with just his right hand, but if he lost both his hands, he would never be able to hunt again, and would no longer be a Mad Hunter, but only a Mad Man. So the Mad Hunter returned to the ancient and deep forest, searching with his piercing eye for the wise princess. The crafty goblins were out searching for mischief when they saw the Mad Hunter on the prowl. We cannot let him find the princess, said the goblins, and so they devised a plan. It was wash day, and the princess has hung her beautiful gown out to dry. They stole it from the line and stuffed it full of straw, and then returned to where the Mad Hunter was scouring the paths of the forest. As the Mad Hunter turned down the path that would have led him to a big wooden house, the goblins danced a distraught princess in and out of view in the opposite direction. Their views worked. The hunter fixed his piercing eye on them and followed through the day and into the night. They led him away from the true princess. As the night fell, the crafty goblins realized the error in their plan. The Mad Hunter was now hunting them. If he caught them, he would not be kind, so they put their heads together and came up with a plan. It did not take them long to realize where they should go. They led the Mad Hunter to the edge of the deep, icy lake, and when he came into view, they weighed the fake princess down with stones and dropped her into the frigid water, carefully not to plunge into the depths themselves, lest the moon hag take her revenge on them. The Mad Hunter removed his clothing and dove in after the fake princess. He followed the shape of the sinking princess deep into the chilly water, down below where the ice covered the lake's surface. Finally he caught her, but when she spun her towards him, he realized she had no head, and that her body was stuffed with straw. And then he felt a slippery fin brush his shoulder as the moon hag loomed overhead. The next morning the princess went to retrieve her gown from the clothing line and found out it was gone. She immediately suspected the goblins of mischief and called, "Goblin, did you take my gown?" The goblins emerged from the cave and nodded sadly. "Now what will I wear?" asked the princess, sad and angry, that she had lost her only dress. "Let us explain," said the goblins. So they told the princess the story of the Mad Hunter, and when they produced his clothing, which was a bit large for the princess, but much warmer than her beautiful gown, she immediately forgave them. "Thank you, my friend," she said, "for rescuing me and for this clothing, which will keep me much warmer in the winter than my beautiful gown." The Mad Hunter was forced to remain below the lake with the moon hag, but she did not kill him because, even reduced to just one hand, he was still a useful servant. Lo, he plotted the day he would emerge to once again hunt the white princess and earn back his left hand. And that is the story how the crafty goblins rescued the prize princess from the Mad Hunter. The pelican helped her friends. Once upon a time in the deep and ancient forest, an early winter storm blanketed everything in snow. It was so early in the year, and the creatures of the forest were not yet ready for an ordinary winter, much less a bad one, and everyone agreed the storm was a sign that the ice cream had planned for a long, cold winter. The princess had grown up in a kingdom where it was sunny all year long, and the goblins were very young, so no one in the big wooden house knew how to prepare for such a winter. The house was not well insulated, and they did not have enough fuel or food. Only the piteous pelican noticed their plight, and when it came time to fly south with the other birds, her heart was heavy with sadness. "What can I do?" she thought. "I'm a migratory bird, and if I were to stay, who would look after my flock?" The time came to go, and the pelican struggled to take flight. It felt that the leaden weight was stuck right in the center of her chest. "What could I do?" she thought. "I'm a migratory bird, and if I were to stay, who would look after my flock?" She managed to take off, but only just barely, flapping fiercely to catch up with the other birds. As the piteous pelican began her journey, the storm picked up, battering her and her a fro. She had fallen well behind the flock, and she was already growing tired. But for all her challenges in the air, she could tell things were much worse on the ground. A deep breeze settled over the forest. The leaden weight in her chest grew heavier as she thought of the princess and the goblins. What can I do? She thought. I'm a migratory bird, and if I were to stay, he would look after my flock. The storm intensified, and the pelican was in a total whiteout. She knew she should have disappeared, and she still could feel as well as the weight, which had grown and grown until she thought she might drop out of the sky. She had felt called to help the princess and the goblins, but she had ignored it. I should have stayed, she thought. It was the right thing to do, and now I'm lost and nowhere to make it right. Suddenly she was plucked from the sky and disposed in the hall of the Ice King. Pelican, he said, you are flying in circles around my mountain. I was lost, she said, weighted down by the weight of guilt in my heart. The Ice King stared at her sagely. Is it guilt or is it something else? Open your beak. He reached down into pulling out a glowing stone. The Peleus Pelican was surprised at how it filled with her warmth, chasing away cold and doubt. You know what you must do, said the Ice King. The Peleus Pelican flew straight to the big wooden house. Snow had already blown in through the many cracks, and the ice crept through across the floorboards. She found the Princess Goblins huddled in the front of a quiet hearth, nearly frozen solid. No, she cried, and when she placed the stone in the princess' lap, the warmth of it spread through the whole of the house, melting all that had frozen. The princess threw her arms around the pelican's chest, and the goblins clung to her legs. Thank you, they cried. You're welcome, said the pelican, smiling in deep satisfaction. What is that? Asked the princess, staring at the wonderful stone. At first, said the pelican, I thought it was my guilt, but then the Ice King pulled it out of me. I realized there's something much more powerful. Just then the storm broke and the skies cleared. The pelican filled the big wooden house loader with food from her beak, and then she took to the skies, lightened by the knowledge that through her clarity, everyone in the big wooden house would be warm and fed until spring. And that's how the story of how the Peleus Pelican saved the White Princess and the crafty goblins from a long winter. Wow, there is still so many stories to go. Oh, it's late.